About 20 years ago, I sat in a neurologist's office and heard the words I can still remember today. I was young, maybe about 20, 21 years old. My daughter Clara was just a baby, not even a year old. I was a young mom trying to figure out life and trying to raise a baby and optimistic about our future. And suddenly, I was being told that I needed to prepare for a future I hadn't planned for based on the lesions in my upper spine and in my brain. They encouraged me to prepare myself and my family for disability, not possibly expected disability. I remember sitting there and trying to process what I was hearing. How do you process something like that at only 20, 21 years old? How do you hear someone tell you that your future may include losing your mobility, losing your independence, losing all that you had planned, and potentially becoming wheelchair bound before you've even had a chance to raise your own children? The truth is, I don't think I fully processed it. I think I just survived it because there is often a moment after diagnosis where it feels like you have life before diagnosis and life after diagnosis. And if you've been diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, or if you have a loved one who has, maybe you know exactly what I'm talking about. For a while, every symptom becomes scary. Every sensation becomes a question. Every bad day becomes a fear. You start wondering what the future holds. You start wondering what your body is doing. You start wondering whether your life is going to look anything like what you imagined. And that's why I wanted to make these videos. Not because I have all the answers or a secret cure. Certainly not, because I think everyone's journey is going to look just like mine, because it won't. I'm making this video because after 20 years of living with MS, there are things that I wish that someone had explained to me from the beginning. Things that would have saved me years of confusion. Things that would have given me hope sooner, and things that would have helped me to understand what was actually happening inside my body. Because when I was first diagnosed, most of the conversation sounded something like this: your immune system is attacking your nervous system. And while technically that may be true, that explanation also never really felt complete to me. Maybe you felt that too. Because if someone tells you that your immune system is attacking your body, the next question naturally becomes, why would a body designed for survival suddenly start to attack itself? Why would a system designed to protect me suddenly become my enemy? And for years, that question stayed in the back of my mind. The more I learned about health, the more I studied nutrition, inflammation, digestion, stress, sleep, and the human body, the more I began to realize something. Maybe my body wasn't actually trying to destroy me. Maybe my body was trying to communicate with me. Now, I know that statement might sound a little odd or upsetting to some people. I understand that. I'm not denying that MS is real. It definitely is. And I'm not denying that MS lesions are real. They definitely are. Believe me, I've lived with them. I've seen my MRIs. I know that they're not pretend. But I began looking at my body differently. Instead of seeing my body as broken or confused or messed up, I started asking, what if my body is overwhelmed? What if my body is overloaded? What if my body is responding to something? Because when you look at health through that lens, everything can change. You stop fighting your body. You start supporting it. You stop seeing symptoms as random acts of betrayal, and you start seeing them as information. And that single shift can change the entire direction of your journey. It definitely did mine. Before we talk about food, before we talk about supplements, before we talk about healing frameworks, I think we need to start with a simple understanding of what multiple sclerosis actually is. Because understanding creates confidence, and confidence creates hope. And hope matters more than most people realize. So let's start here. Let's talk about what MS really is. Because one of the most frustrating things about being diagnosed with MS is that people use a lot of complicated words without ever really explaining what they mean. I remember hearing terms like autoimmune disease, demyelination, lesions, inflammation, neurodegeneration, and immune dysfunction. Honestly, most of it sounded terrifying, but it didn't necessarily make sense. So, did I need to be scared or not? I wasn't sure. And when you're scared or of being scared, what you need isn't more complicated language. You need understanding. So let's simplify this. Imagine your nervous system is a giant communication network. Your brain is constantly sending messages throughout the body. Every movement you make, every thought you think, every step you take, every word you speak, every sensation you feel, all of it depends on communication. And your brain is sending signals down pathways that travel through your spinal cord and out into your body. Now imagine those pathways are electrical signals or electrical wires, because in many ways, that's exactly what they are. Your nerves carry electrical signals, but just like the wiring in your home, those electrical signals need protection. That's where myelin comes in. Myelin is like the insulation that's wrapped around an electrical wire. Its job is to protect the signal and help it travel efficiently. When that insulation is healthy, communication happens smoothly. The signal gets where it's supposed to go. Everything works the way it was designed to work. But when that insulation becomes damaged, things change. Signals can slow down, signals can become distorted, and sometimes the message gets through, sometimes it doesn't. And depending on where the damage occurs, the symptoms can look very different from person to person. For one woman or person, I meant to obviously have MS, but it may be vision problems. I say women MS because for me at 17, before I even knew that I had MS, my vision had doubled. It was one of my first major symptoms. For another, it could be numbness or fatigue. For another, it could be balance issues or cognitive changes like brain fog. There's a lot of different symptoms that can result from MS, and that can be very confusing. It's one of the main reasons MS is so confusing, because no two people seem to experience it exactly the same way. The location of the damage, it matters. And the severity of the damage, it matters. The overall health of the person matters. And that's why I believe it's important to stop comparing ourselves to other people. Your journey is your journey. Their journey is theirs. One of the most discouraging things that you can do after diagnosis is spend your life measuring yourself against someone else's experience. I've seen women become terrified because they met someone whose MS progressed rapidly. I've also seen women become discouraged because they expected improvement to happen faster than it did. Neither comparison is helpful because your body has its own story. Your body has its own history. Your body has its own set of circumstances, and your body deserves to be supported based on where it is right now, not where someone else's body is. Now, let's talk about the part that challenged my thinking the most. For years, I was told that my immune system, like I mentioned, was attacking itself, attacking my body. And again, I'm not saying that description is wrong, but it did feel incomplete. Because the question I could never stop asking was, why would my immune system suddenly become confused? And why would it stop recognizing the difference between friend and foe? Why would it start reacting in a way that seemed harmful? The more I learned about the immune system, the more I realized that the immune system doesn't operate in a vacuum. It doesn't wake up one morning and then randomly decide to do something. It's constantly responding to information from your gut, information from your environment, information from your hormones, your stress, your infections, your nutrients, your sleep or lack thereof, information from the nervous system. Your immune system is listening all the time. And that realization changed everything for me. Because instead of asking, how do I fight my immune system? I started asking, what is my immune system responding to? That question led me down a path that completely changed how I viewed health. And I think it might change how you view your body too. Because once I stopped seeing my body as malfunctioning or broken, I started seeing it as overwhelmed. And that distinction matters. A broken thing gets thrown away, an overwhelmed thing gets supported. A broken thing has no future. An overwhelmed thing can recover. A broken thing creates hopelessness. An overwhelmed thing creates possibility. And whether you're newly diagnosed or you've been living with MS for decades, I want you to hear this. Your body is not your enemy. Your body is not waking up every morning trying to ruin your life. Your body is trying to survive. Your body is trying to adapt. Your body is trying to protect you the best way it knows how. And while that protection may not always look the way that we want it to, understanding that changes the entire conversation, because now we can stop focusing exclusively on what's wrong and start focusing on what might help. And that's exactly where we're going next. Because if the body is responding, the next question naturally becomes, responding to what? Let's talk about the hidden burdens that may be quietly keeping your body stuck. When most people are diagnosed with multiple sclerosis, the conversation usually becomes focused on symptoms, fatigue, brain fog, numbness, balance problems, pain, weakness. And those symptoms absolutely matter. I've lived with them. I understand how frustrating they can be. But one of the biggest mistakes I see people make is becoming so focused on the symptoms that they never stop to ask what might be contributing to them. Think about it this way. Imagine your kitchen sink is overflowing. Water is pouring onto the floor. Would you grab towels? Of course. But eventually, you would want to figure out why the sink is overflowing in the first place. Because if you only focus on the water on the floor and never address what's happening upstream, the problem never really goes away. That's how I began thinking about my health. Instead of asking only, How do I manage symptoms? I started asking, what is adding stress to my body? What is increasing inflammation? What is making my body work harder than it needs to? Because here's something I've learned after 20 years with MS. Most people don't have one giant problem. Most people have hundreds of small problems, small things that seem insignificant by themselves. But when they stack together year after year, they create a burden the body struggles to carry. Imagine carrying a backpack. The first brick isn't a big deal. The second brick isn't a big deal. The 10th brick starts getting heavy. The 50th brick, it becomes exhausting. That's what I believe happens for many people, not just with MS. With autoimmune disease in general, the body accumulates burdens, stress, poor sleep, nutrient deficiencies, processed food, environmental toxins, digestive stress, chronic inflammation, hormonal imbalances. Gotta mention that. And eventually the body reaches a point where it simply can't compensate the way it used to. That's why one of the biggest mindset shifts I want you to make is this. Stop looking for one thing. Start looking at the whole picture. Because healthy or healing, it usually doesn't happen because one magical thing changes. Healing often happens because we begin removing burdens, one burden at a time, one habit at a time, one decision at a time. Let's start with food. Not now. Before anyone gets nervous, don't swipe away. I'm not about to tell you that food is the only cause of MS. I do not believe it's that simple. But I do believe that food can either increase the burden on the body or reduce it. Food is information. Every meal sends signals. Every snack sends signals. Every drink sends signals. The question is, what signals are we sending? When we eat highly processed foods, artificial ingredients, excessive sugar, and damaged fats, the body has to work harder. Digestion becomes harder. Inflammation often increases and blood sugar becomes less stable. Energy becomes less stable. And when energy is unstable, everything feels harder. Have you ever noticed that some days your body feels like it's running on fumes? Like you're dragging yourself through the day? That's not always because of MS itself. Sometimes it's because the systems responsible for producing energy are struggling. And those systems are heavily influenced by what we put in our bodies every day. Then there's sugar. Now listen, I'm not about to shame anyone over food. I've eaten plenty of things over the years that weren't ideal. This isn't about perfection. It's about awareness. The challenge with excess sugar is that it tends to create a roller coaster. Energy spikes, energy crashes, cravings increase, inflammation increases. And many people, they end up trapped in a cycle where they're constantly chasing energy instead of creating it. Then we have poor quality fats. This is one of the most misunderstood topics in nutrition. For years, people were told that fat was the enemy, but your brain is largely made of fat. Your nervous system depends on fat. Myelin depends on fat. The issue isn't fat. The issue is the type of fat. The body tends to do much better with healthy, stable fats than with heavily processed industrial oils that have been altered far beyond their natural state. Let's move beyond food for a minute, because one of the most overlooked burdens I see is chronic stress. And when I say stress, I'm not talking about bad days. I'm talking about living in a constant state of pressure, always rushing, always worrying, always carrying something emotionally heavy. Your body keeps score. And I don't mean that in a dramatic way. I mean it biologically. Your nervous system responds to your environment. It responds to your thoughts. It responds to your relationships. It responds even to uncertainty. And when stress becomes chronic, the body begins diverting resources towards survival. Less energy for repair, less energy for recovery, less energy for resilience. Then there's sleep. And honestly, I think sleep may be one of the most underrated healing tools on the planet. We'll talk more about sleep later because it deserves its own section. But for now, I want you to remember something simple. You cannot heal efficiently if you're not recovering. And recovery happens during rest. Another burden many people never consider is digestive health. If nutrients aren't being absorbed properly, if the gut is irritated, if beneficial bacteria are depleted, your body has to work much harder. Imagine trying to build a house with half the materials missing. That's what healing can feel like when digestion isn't working properly. And when there are environmental burdens like mold, chemicals, pesticides, air quality, water quality, again, I'm not telling you to become afraid of everything. Fear isn't helpful. Awareness is helpful because awareness gives us options. The goal isn't perfection. The goal is reducing unnecessary burden whenever possible. One of the most encouraging things I discovered on my journey is that healing doesn't require solving everything all at once. You don't need to overhaul your entire life tomorrow. You don't need to become perfect. You don't need to eliminate everything possible, like toxins, food, stress, or all the triggers imaginable overnight. That's just not possible. You simply start removing one bad brick at a time. And eventually, the backpack gets lighter. And when the backpack gets lighter, the body often responds. Maybe not overnight, but often in meaningful ways with more energy, better sleep, less inflammation, improved digestion, more resilience. And those small improvements matter because small improvements become, and larger improvements become a different life. So now that we've talked about the burdens, let's talk about one of the most important systems involved in healing. The system that influences your immune system, your inflammation, your nutrient absorption, your mood, your energy, your brain. Let's talk about the gut. If you've spent any time in the health world, you've probably heard people talk about the gut and its impact on health. Honestly, it's gut health is one of those phrases that gets thrown around so often that many people stop paying attention to it. But I want you to stay with me here because what I first started learning about the connection between the gut and the immune system completely changed how I viewed healing. And it may change how you view it too. Most people think about the digestive system as a food processing system. You eat food, you digest food, you absorb nutrients, end of story. But your digestive system is doing so much more than that. Your gut is constantly communicating with your brain. It's communicating with your immune system. It's communicating with your hormones. It's communicating with nearly every major system in your body. In many ways, your gut acts like a command center. And when the command center becomes disrupted, the effects can ripple throughout the entire body. Now, let's simplify this. Imagine you own a large company. Every department in the company depends on communication. If communication starts to break down, mistakes happen, production drops, problems start appearing everywhere. The problem may show up in one department, but the cause might actually be from somewhere else. The human body works in a similar way. Your immune system doesn't operate independently. Your brain doesn't operate independently, and your hormones obviously do not operate independently. Everything is connected, and one of the major connection points is the gut. One of the things researchers have discovered is that a large portion of the immune system is associated with the digestive tract. Think about that for a moment. The very system involved in autoimmune disease is closely connected to what is happening inside the gut. That doesn't mean gut problems cause every autoimmune condition, but it does mean the gut deserves our attention, because if digestion isn't functioning well, the body faces multiple challenges at the same time. Nutrient absorption may decrease, inflammation may increase, the balance of beneficial bacteria may shift in a negative way, the immune system may receive confusing signals, every production may suffer, and over time, those issues begin affecting everything else. This is one reason I became so interested in digestion, because I started asking myself, if my body is trying to repair itself, how can it do it that efficiently if it isn't absorbing what it needs? Think about building a house. You can order all the supplies in the world: lumber, concrete, nails, windows, roofing. But if none of those materials ever make it to the construction site, the house is not going to get built. That's how I think about nutrient absorption. You can eat wonderful foods. You can take all the supplements. You can spend a fortune on the latest health protocols. But if your digestive system is not responding and processing and absorbing those nutrients effectively, your body may still struggle. This is often why I tell women that digestion isn't a side issue, it's a foundational issue. All right, now let's talk about something else that has fascinated me: the bacteria living inside your digestive tract. I know that sounds strange at first. Most of us grew up thinking all bacteria was bad, but that's not true. Your body contains trillions of bacteria. Some are beneficial, some are less beneficial, and the balance between them matters. These bacteria help with digestion. They help produce certain nutrients, and they influence the immune system. They influence inflammation. And some research even suggests they influence mood and mental health, which makes sense when you think about it. Have you ever noticed how often emotional stress and digestive issues seem to travel together? Or how many people with digestive problems also struggle with fatigue? Nothing in the body operates in isolation. Everything is connected. One thing I noticed over the years is that many women become obsessed with finding the perfect supplement. I know, I'm included in that many women category. I've done it, so don't feel judged. I understand. But looking for that perfect supplement while completely ignoring the foundation. I want to say they, but really we want the miracle product, don't we? Wouldn't a miracle pill be so nice, or a miracle protocol? But often the greatest improvements happen when we start rebuilding just the basics: digestion, hydration, sleep, nutrition, stress management, consistency, all these good things, and doing them more often than not. And not because those things are exciting, but just because they're foundational. And here's something important I want you to hear: you do not need to be perfect, and you don't need to have a perfect gut to begin improving. You don't need perfect digestion. You don't need perfect bacteria. You don't need perfect anything. You simply need to start supporting the system one meal at a time, one habit at a time, one day at a time. For many women, that is going to begin with simplifying food, reducing highly processed foods, and increasing vegetables, adding fiber gradually, and supporting hydration. It's very important. Also, adding fermented foods carefully, if tolerated, that can be a really good idea. And giving the digestive system a little less work and a little more support. And that's one of the biggest themes you'll hear throughout this video and in my book. Ooh, did I mention it yet? I don't know if I did. I'm going to just show you guys. This wasn't even on my plan, but look, I got it. I'm so excited. This is a paperback copy, but it's also available in hardback or ebook, and you can find it on Amazon. I'll put the link in the description below. It's called Finally Understand Multiple Sclerosis. It's my very first book, so I'm super excited. So that being said, let's go back to where we were. In the book and in these videos, we're going to talk about support, not punishment, and not restriction either. You don't want to go into this feeling fear. You have to be restrained to keep. No, we don't want any of that, because healing the body isn't about forcing the body. It's about creating an environment where the body can do what it was designed to do. And that is going to lead us directly into the next thing I wish someone had taught me much earlier. Food, not as calories, not as points, not as something to fear, but as information. Because once I understood that concept, I never looked at food the same way again. One of the biggest shifts that happened in my own health journey came when I stopped looking at food as calories. And I started looking at food as information. That one idea really was a huge change for me, because every time you eat something, your body receives a message. Every meal sends a signal, every snack sends a signal, every drink. You get the idea? They're signals. The question isn't about whether food is communicating with your body. The question is, what is it saying? For years, I think many of us were taught to think about food almost exclusively through the lens of weight. Calories in, calories out, lose weight, gain weight. And while body composition certainly matters, I think that conversation often misses something much bigger. Food affects inflammation. Food affects energy. It affects hormones and digestion and the nervous system. It affects the gut microbiome. Food affects how we feel. And once I started understanding that, I stopped asking, how many calories are in this? And I started asking, what is this food telling my body? Because here's the truth. Your body is constantly listening. A meal made primarily of highly processed ingredients sends a different message than a meal that was built from whole foods. A meal loaded with sugar sends a different message than a meal rich in fiber and nutrients. A meal that's built around real foods sends a different message than one built around convenience foods. And none of this is about guilt. I don't want you to feel guilty. I want to be very clear about that. I don't believe shame has ever helped anyone heal. This isn't about beating yourself up because you've eaten foods that aren't ideal. I've done that. You've done that. We've all done that. This is about understanding, because when you understand something, you can make different choices. And different choices, repeated consistently, can create a different future. One of the things I began noticing years ago, that many people were trying to heal their bodies while continuing to feed inflammation every single day. Not intentionally, simply because nobody had ever connected the dots for them. They didn't realize that what they ate today could influence how they felt tomorrow. They didn't realize that digestion and inflammation were connected. They didn't realize that blood sugar and energy, they are connected too. It's all connected, especially the nervous system and the nutrition that we consume. It's connected. Now, that doesn't mean there is one perfect diet for everyone. Absolutely not. Okay. In fact, one of the things that I've learned over the years is that human beings love certainty. We want someone to tell us exactly what not to eat and exactly what works and exactly what doesn't. But biology, it doesn't always cooperate with our desire for simplicity. Different people are gonna respond differently. Different bodies have different needs, different histories, create different circumstances. That's why I don't want you obsessing over perfection. I want you focusing on principles. And one of the most important principles is this: the closer food is in its natural form, the easier it tends to be for the body to recognize. Think about vegetables. Think about fruits. Think about herbs. Think about nuts and seeds. Think about foods that have existed for generations. The body understands those foods. Now, compare that to foods created in factories with ingredient lists that lead to a misunderstanding of what it even is. Things that read like a chemistry experiment. The body has to work much harder. If you don't understand the ingredients on the ingredient list, neither does your body. If your eyes don't understand it because it's not something you can pick off of a tree or out of a garden, then your body doesn't understand it either. I know it's rough, but that's the reality. The body has to work harder to make sense of it if it doesn't come from the natural environment. Now, again, this isn't fear. It's simply awareness. And awareness gives us options. One of the biggest things I encourage people to do is increase the amount of colorful food you're eating. Color matters. Nature doesn't create color by accident. The deep blues and berries, the reds and pomegranates, the greens and leafy vegetables, the oranges and carrots and sweet potatoes. These colors often represent compounds that help protect the plant, and many of those same compounds can be beneficial to us as well. This is one reason I encourage women to eat the rainbow, not because it's trendy, because diversity matters. Different color provides different nutrients. Different nutrients support different systems. And the more diversity we create, the more tools we're giving the body. Let's talk about vegetables for a moment. I know vegetables aren't the most exciting topic in the world. Trust me. Nobody clicks on YouTube hoping to watch a thrilling documentary about broccoli. But vegetables are incredibly powerful, especially the cruciferous vegetables. Broccoli, cabbage, kale, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower. These foods contain compounds that help support the body's natural detoxification systems. They provide fiber, they provide nutrients, they support the gut microbiome, and they help create an internal environment that is generally more supportive of healing. Then there are also leafy greens. Leafy greens are some of the most nutrient dense foods available. They're loaded with vitamins, minerals, antioxidants, and fiber. And one of the easiest ways to increase them is through smoothies. This is one reason smoothies become such an important part of my own routine because they're simple, they're practical, and they make it easier to consistently consume foods that support the body. Even my youngest son, he's 13 years old and he is very active. He does tennis, he does football, he does wrestling, and he currently is doing fit camp, and then he'll do football camp because it's summer of 2026 currently. So he is very busy. And every day he gets up and he has his smoothie with all of the things. And we're going to talk more about it, but I went off on a little bit of a tangent here. I just want you to know, whether you're a 13-year-old teenage boy or an just around the corner 40-year-old woman, you can do it. Smoothies are so doable. So do it. Okay, let's talk about something that surprises many people: healthy fats. For years, fat was treated like a villain. Everything became low fat. Fat-free, reduced fat. You remember it? All the fat-free yogurts, fat-free cottage cheese, fat-free crackers, fat-free, like everything. You were there, most likely, if you're above 20. And yet during that same period, chronic disease, it continued increasing. You remember? The problem was simply just not fat. The problem was understanding which fats support the body and which fats tend to create more burden. Your brain is largely made of fat. Your nervous system depends on fat. Hormones depend on fat. The body needs healthy fats. Olive oil, avocados, nuts, seeds, omega-3 rich foods. These provide building blocks that many people are lacking. And then there's fiber. Fiber may not be glamorous, but it is one of the most important nutrients most people don't get enough of. Fiber feeds beneficial bacteria and it supports digestion. Fiber supports blood sugar stability and it supports detoxification. Fiber helps to create a healthier internal environment. And here's what I have found over the years. When women start increasing vegetables, increasing fiber, increasing nutrient density, and reducing highly processed foods, something interesting often happens. Their bodies begin responding. Maybe not overnight, maybe not dramatically, but gradually. Energy improves, digestion improves, cravings improve, and those improvements create momentum. Now, before we leave this section, I want to say something important. Food matters, but food isn't everything. And this is where I think some health conversations go wrong. Food is an important tool, but it's only one piece of the puzzle, because you can eat perfectly and still struggle if you're sleeping 4 hours a night. You can eat perfectly and still struggle if you're constantly stressed. You can eat perfectly and still struggle if your nervous system never feels safe. Which brings us to something that may be even more important than food: your nervous system. Because the body cannot heal efficiently while it's stuck in survival mode. It just can't. And once I understood that, it really changed the way I looked at stress forever. One of the biggest breakthroughs in my own health journey had nothing to do with supplements. It had nothing to do with food. It had nothing to do with some miracle protocol. It came from understanding my nervous system. And honestly, I wish someone had taught me this years earlier because for a long time, I thought stress was just an emotion, something happening in my mind, something I needed to just get over, push through, be tough. But stress isn't just emotional. Stress is biological. Your body responds to stress whether you realize it or not. And one of the things I've learned over the years is that your body doesn't really care where the stress comes from. To your nervous system, stress is stress. It doesn't matter whether that threat is like a financial problem or a difficult marriage or a health diagnosis, of sleep or an argument or problems at work, maybe a traumatic experience, or even constant worry. Your nervous system responds, and that response is designed to protect you. The problem is that many of us are living in that response all day. Think about how human beings were designed. Thousands of years ago, if there was a danger, your body needed to react immediately. Heart rate increased, blood flow changed, stress hormones increased. Energy was redirected toward survival. Of course it was. That response was incredibly helpful when the threat lasted a few minutes. The problem is that modern stress often lasts years, sometimes decades, and eventually the body pays a price for constantly being on high alert. So I think this is one of the most overlooked pieces of health, especially among women, because women are often carrying so much. They're raising children, they're taking care of spouses, working jobs, managing homes, supporting everyone else, handling responsibilities, and carrying emotional burdens, their own and those of loved ones, even their pets, as I'm getting onto my dog right now. Many people have been carrying burdens and doing it for so long that they don't even realize how exhausted they are. You can think exhaustion is normal or that overwhelm is normal. People think feeling constantly stressed is normal, but normal and common, they are not the same thing. Something can be common without being healthy. And I think that's exactly what's happening for many women. Their nervous systems never get a chance to fully rest. They're always anticipating, always planning, always solving problems, always carrying the next responsibility. And eventually their bodies begin responding to that constant pressure. Sleep becomes more difficult, digestion becomes more difficult, energy becomes more difficult, and recovery becomes more difficult. Now, I want to say something that I think is incredibly important. This is not your fault, and it's not about being weak. I know there are women watching this who have tried harder than anyone around them realizes. I know you have. Women who get out of bed every day despite fatigue, who continue showing up despite symptoms, and who keep caring for everyone else while quietly struggling. You're not weak. You're tired. There's a difference. And when I began to understand that difference, I started treating myself differently. I stopped approaching my body like it was a machine that needed to be forced. And I started approaching it like it was a living system that needed support. That shift changes things. It did for me. Instead of constantly asking, how do I push harder? I try to ask myself, how do I help my body actually feel safe? Because your nervous system is always asking one question: am I safe? And the answer influences nearly everything. When your nervous system feels safe, digestion improves, sleep improves, recovery improves, hormone balance improves, resilience improves. But when your nervous system constantly feels threatened, the body starts prioritizing survival over healing. And honestly, that makes perfect sense. If your brain believes you're in danger, it's not going to devote resources to repair. It's going to devote resources to protection. That's why one of the most important things I teach is that healing isn't only about removing bad things. It's about creating safety, creating moments where your body can finally exhale, creating moments where your nervous system can stop scanning for danger, creating moments where your body remembers what calm feels like. And here's something beautiful. The body often responds surprisingly quickly when we begin doing that. Not because stress caused everything, but because reducing stress removes one more burden from the backpack. It's one less brick. Remember the backpack that we talked about earlier? Every stressor is another brick. And when you start removing bricks, the body often starts responding. Maybe your sleep improves a little. Maybe your digestion improves a little. Maybe your energy improves a little. Those improvements matter because healing is rarely one giant leap. It's usually hundreds of small improvements that accumulate over time. And one of the simplest ways I've found to help the nervous system feel safer is something every single person watching this video already knows how to do: breathing. Not shallow breathing, not rushed breathing, intentional breathing. Because breathing may be one of the fastest ways to communicate directly with your nervous system. And once I understood what breathing was actually doing inside the body, I never looked at it the same again. So let's talk about that next. All right. Now, here is how I would talk about something so simple. Most people do overlook it. So, one of the most fascinating things I've learned during my health journey is that we breathe, or the way we breathe, can directly influence the way our nervous system responds. So, think about what happens when you're scared. Your breathing changes. It becomes shallow, fast, tight. Sometimes you don't even realize it's happening. Your shoulders rise, your chest tightens, your body prepares for danger. Now think about what happens when you're completely relaxed. Maybe you're sitting on a porch, watching the sunset. Maybe you're just sitting beside a campfire. Maybe you're spending time with someone you love. Your breathing, it just naturally slows down. Your body softens, your muscles relax. Everything begins to feel different. What's interesting is that breathing doesn't just reflect how we feel. Breathing can influence how we feel. In other words, it works both ways. Your emotional state affects your breathing, but your breathing can also affect your emotional state. That's incredibly powerful because it means we have access to a tool that can help communicate directly with the nervous system. And one of the key players involved in that communication is something called the vagus nerve. Now, don't let the fancy name intimidate you. Think of the vagus nerve as a communication highway. It connects the brain with many different systems throughout the body. It helps influence your heart rate, digestion, stress response, inflammation, mood, relaxation, even. And when the vagus nerve receives signals that suggest safety, the body often begins shifting out of survival mode. And that shift matters because healing and survival are not the same thing. Your body is incredibly good at surviving, but survival mode isn't where repair happens. Repair happens when the body feels safe enough to invest energy into rebuilding. And one of the easiest ways to send that safety signal is through intentional breathing. This is why I encourage people to practice deep breathing every single day. Not because it's trendy, not because it's magical, but because it helps to create a state that supports healing. Now, I want to walk you through the breathing exercise I personally recommend. It's simple, it's gentle, and really almost anyone can do it. You can stand or sit, your feet shoulder width apart if you're standing. If sitting like I am, relax your shoulders, allow your body to soften. Now, as you slowly inhale through your nose, raise your arms up until they reach about your chest level. And while you're inhaling, allow your body to expand. Not your chest, like your belly. So, this is important. Most people spend their lives breathing into their chest, but deep breathing begins lower. As your belly expands, imagine you're filling your lungs completely, not forcing, straining, just breathing deeply and naturally, then slowly exhale. And as you exhale, lower your arms back down. Let your shoulders relax. Let your jaw relax. Let your body relax. Then repeat. Slow inhale, slow exhale. 3 times. That's it. Simple, gentle, powerful. And while you're doing this, I want you to pay attention to something. Notice how different your body feels after just a few breaths. Notice how your shoulders feel. Notice how your tension changes. Notice how your mind changes. Because often we're carrying stress we don't even realize we're carrying. Sometimes we're holding tension in our neck, and our jaw, and our shoulders, and our stomach. And intentional breathing helps to release some of that burden. Now let's go a little deeper. One of the reasons I'm so interested in practices like breathing is because of something called neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to adapt, to learn, to recognize, to create pathways. For years, scientists believed the adult brain was relatively fixed. Today, we know that's not true. The brain is constantly adapting, constantly changing, constantly responding to experience. Think about learning to ride a bicycle, or learning to play an instrument, or learning a new language. At first, it feels like it's so difficult. It's so impossible. I have a friend, love her dearly. Sandra. She's gone to Peru. She's on a mission for 3 years, and she's English speaking, and she had to learn Spanish. Of course she did. And so I challenged myself to learn it because I'm going to go visit her. My husband and I are going to go visit her and her husband during their last year in Peru. At least that's our goal. Wish us luck. We want to be able to make it happen. But we want to get out there and visit them. So I thought I would learn Spanish. Ah! Have you guys tried? Oh my gosh, it feels so difficult, so awkward, it's so uncomfortable. But over time, I know the brain adapts, not because I've conquered it, but because my friend Sandra has just done so well. And she is learning and just, it's amazing. New pathways develop, new patterns emerge. That's neuroplasticity. And one of the most encouraging things I discovered is that the brain remains adaptable throughout life. Now, does that mean that we can simply think our way out of MS? Of course not. But it does mean the brain is far more dynamic than many people realize. And that should give us hope, because hope matters. Now, I have not cleared all of the lesions from my brain. On the last MRI, they were still there. But what is helpful and hopeful is that from that MRI, compared to the one before it, lesions have changed. Lesions that were once there are gone. Now, does not mean I'm completely healed, and it doesn't mean they're all gone, but some of them healed, which means that for me personally, my brain is capable of healing lesions that have happened in response to my autoimmune disease. And if I can do it, so can you. Now, another concept that gets a lot of attention in neuroscience is something called brain-derived neurotrophic factor. Neurotrophic factor, sorry, or BDNF. You don't need to memorize the name. What matters is understanding what it does. Many researchers describe as fertilizer for the brain. It helps support learning and adaptation, resilience, and healthy brain function. Activities associated with supporting healthy BDNF levels include things like exercise, quality sleep, stress reduction, healthy nutrition, of course, movement, learning. Do you notice a pattern? There are many, or these are many of the same things that we've already been discussing. And that's because healing isn't usually about finding one magic answer. It's about creating an environment that supports the body's natural ability to adapt. That's what we're doing, piece by piece, habit by habit, day by day. And one of the simplest habits available to us is breathing. Not because breathing cures diseases, I'm not trying to say that, but because breathing helps create the conditions where healing becomes more possible. And that's a theme you're going to hear over and over again throughout this video and in my book and in any future videos. We're not chasing perfection. We are creating an environment where the body feels supported, an environment where the nervous system feels safer, an environment where healing has a better chance to occur. And one of the most powerful ways to support that environment is something many of us desperately need more of: rest. Rest, which means it's time to talk about sunlight, sleep, and recovery. Because if breathing helps the body feel safe during the day, okay, sleep is where some of the deepest repair work happens. So we have to address it.